Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council. Today is January 18th. We're going to wait just a few minutes for additional people to come into our virtual room for this meeting. And in the meantime, I'm going to make some of our Climate Emergency Council members co-hosts for the meeting. So you'll see that come in as people join us. Keith, Councilmember Garola, I also see you on two squares. Is one for audio and one for video or something along those lines?
Yeah, so I don't have a camera hooked up yet to my desk, my PC, so I'm using my iPhone for that.
Okay, that works. I've just got both of them marked as co-hosts and VCCEC. So again, as people kind of come in here, we're just making the council members co-hosts for the meeting, and we'll start in just a moment or two while we let a few more people join us. This is the Climate Emergency Council meeting for January 18th, and thanks for joining us.
Hey, Clay, this is Keith. Towards the end of the meeting, 1:45-ish or so, I'll just be working off of my iPhone while I'm commuting on the road. So
okay, thank you for letting us know. And at this time, I believe I have all of the Climate Emergency Council members who are in the room marked as co-hosts, and I've put either chair, vice chair, or VCCEC next to your name. If I skip somebody, let me know, although I'm trying to scan who we've got in the room. Chair Schnapp, it is now 5 after. We're still missing a handful of people, and I'm expecting, I've had communication with at least 1 or 2 other council members, and I'm expecting to join us. But I see 5 council members out of 10 at the moment. Oh, I do see another one. So now I see 6. So Chair, with 6 out of 10 here, we do have a quorum. You're welcome to begin the meeting if you would like to, or we can wait another minute or two to see if any of the others join us. I do have notification from one of them, one of our council members, that she will not be able to join us.
Let's go ahead and, hi Phil, let's go ahead and wait a minute and see if anyone else will be joining us, if we didn't get any other folks telling us they wouldn't be able to. So we'll wait one more minute.
Okay.
Thanks. Right, so with that, it's another minute, so let's just go ahead and get started with the folks that are here. So welcome everybody to the Ventura County Climate Emergency Council regular meeting for Tuesday, January 18th, 2022, here at 12:05. This is a meeting that will be conducted via Zoom and telephonically in response to the declared state and local emergencies due to the novel coronavirus and limited public access to the Hall of Administration. And it's consistent with the governor's executive orders N-29-20. This Ventura County Climate Emergency Council meeting will be conducted via Zoom and telephonically. And so as we go ahead and get started, let's have a roll call, please.
Of course. Councilmember White.
Here.
Councilmember Ferris.
Here.
Chair Schnapp.
Here.
Councilmember Kessley. Councilmember Ramirez. Councilmember Ontiveros.
I'm here.
Thank you. Councilmember Garola.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Hernandez. Councilmember Chavez. Councilmember Baldwin.
Here.
Thank you. And with that, we have a quorum present.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's move on to item number 3, Pledge of Allegiance. And so Councilmember Baldwin, would you lead us in the pledge?
All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. So let's move to item number 4, and that's the approval of minutes from our December 21st, 2021 BCCEC meeting. And I understand that Councilmember White, you have something for us to entertain for a change.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. I just wanted to see the report that the other issues TAC made last time gets into the minutes. And so I would like to have the following words added to the minutes. And Clay has these, so I don't think anybody needs to take notes. Bill White reported that the other issues TAC had met, and intended to bring proposed policies and programs to the CEC in the future, including carbon dioxide emissions from stationary sources and buildings, both new and existing, and methane emissions from oil and gas operations and landfills. So I'd like to see that sentence added into the minutes. And with that addition, I would move approval of the minutes.
Okay, so if,
I'll second it.
okay. All right, so let's go ahead and have a roll call then.
All right. Councilmember White,
Yes.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Chair Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garola,
Aye.
and Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes unanimously with those present.
Okay, so then we've taken care of item number 4. Then let's go ahead and go to public comments for items not on the agenda. This is when we reserve a little bit of time on the meeting agenda to hear from the community on issues that are not being addressed at today's meeting. So I know that we do have members of the public on this call. And if you'd like to speak, you could raise your hand. You could share with us on the chat that you'd like to speak, and or just take yourself off of mute. I think that's a possibility. So with that, is there anyone who'd like to speak?
Chair, I would note that the chat has been disabled for this. We wanted to make sure that people use the channels for communication that the council is expecting and in order.
Okay. All right, thank you. So without chat, go ahead and either raise your hand or take yourself off of mute. And I am not seeing anyone from the public who'd like to speak at this time. Okay,
Chair, I do not see anyone, and we also have not received any public comments that were requested for submission to the council through email or anything else.
okay. All right, so let's go ahead and then move on to, let me see, I just lost my agenda. So let's go ahead and go to the correspondence agenda, and we'll start with item number 6, so correspondence from Councilmember White on December 22nd. And so was that something, Clay, that you were going to share?
Nope, these are items are each solely correspondence agenda items, both those from Councilmember White and the one from Councilmember Baldwin. There was no request to do receive and file or anything. It was just to have those shared and making those available to the public as well as your council. And there were a handful of other correspondence items that were sent out today and after the agenda was posted, which were sent to your council, and they've also been posted to the Climate Emergency Council's website and added under the other agenda items associated with today's meeting.
So this is just really an acknowledgement that we had received correspondence from within the group.
That is correct.
Yeah, okay, all right. So that takes care of item number 6 and 7.
But
So let's go.
It does. I saw that Councilmember White had his hand up.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, no worries. Sylvia, yeah, I don't have anything to add other than to say that I forwarded some interesting articles, or what I thought was interesting articles about climate change that I encourage everybody to read.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, so with that, let's go to the regular agenda, and we have item number 8, which is the resolution to continue this remote teleconference meeting. And so would you introduce that, Clay, and talk about where we are now?
Absolutely. So this is a continuation of what we've been doing for the last few months. And so this authorizes us to continue doing teleconference meetings for another 30-day period. One thing I would note is our next meeting is slightly outside of that 30-day period. In speaking to County Council, he said that basically what we would say is that what we are doing with our next meeting being at, I think it's 32 days outside of today, that we substantially comply. So we are consistent with the core function of the law as it's being made. So it's okay for us to exceed that by a small amount. Although each time we exceed that 30-day window, I will be going back and speaking with county council to make sure that we're not out of line with the purpose of the legislation. So this is going to allow us to continue those remote teleconference meetings without violating the Brown Act.
All right. So with that then, yes, go ahead, Councilmember Baldwin.
Is there any way that we can adopt this every 2 months or adopt a resolution for 2 months as opposed to 1 month?
Not that county council has shared with me, and all of our bodies and boards and committees and things are doing this too. It is a little bit of a hassle administratively. We're hoping that the state does something so that all of the boards and agendas and committees don't have to keep doing this. But for now, we do need to continue doing this. But if that changes, I will let your council know.
So with that, is there a motion?
I'll move approval.
Okay, is there a second?
I second.
All right, thank you. So let's go ahead and have a roll call.
All right. Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Chair Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros,
Yes.
thank you. Councilmember Garola,
Aye.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you. So let's move on to item number 9, which is the update from county executive staff. So Clay, go ahead.
All right, let me just pull up my cheat sheet on my end to make sure I can not skip over things. So there's a few things that I wanted to let folks know about, and let's see. So I wanted a reminder to anyone that's tuning in, this is both for the council as well as members of the public, that we are recording these on YouTube. They're posted. You can find a YouTube channel that's available that's for the climate or that's for the sustainability division and includes a specific playlist for the Climate Emergency Council. So those are all being recorded there. Will continue to be available through YouTube or through the Climate Emergency Council's website, which is ventura.org/VCCEC. And then in addition to that, we have a pretty exciting new energy reduction campaign that's going on that our Tri-County Regional Energy Network is spearheading. That's called the Switches On campaign. And I wanted to bring that to folks' attention. And if people are interested in it, I'd be happy to send that around. One of the correspondence items I believe that we've sent around somewhat recently and that was mentioned in the last meeting was actually related to that. Councilmember Ontiveros, did you have a question?
I do have a question on the agenda where it says materials related to item and agenda, and then there's a HTTPS government meetings and broadcasts. Is that where the link to the YouTube is?
On the, let's see.
Because I thought about checking it out between meetings and I didn't know where to find this link. Can it be please posted to the link to the agenda or something? Because I'm having a hard time finding that.
Sure. And here is where I've just put in the chat now the URL for the Climate Emergency Council website. And if you were to go to that meetings and broadcast page, you can find information on the Climate Emergency Council there. I would say it's amongst all the other boards and committees of the entire county. So there's quite a few of those. And let me,
Yeah, it's just not self-evident, that's all.
If your council would like, and this would be for anyone that's here on the call, I'd be happy to do a quick screen share and show where that is. So it's easier to find, because it is, I would say, it can be challenging to find. Would that be acceptable for me to do that?
Yeah, that would be fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm a time limited in all aspects of my life. So anything
Okay.
that saves me time, I appreciate.
Okay. Let me do that real quick here. And so what we've got is we've got my browser in the window. I've gone to the URL that Councilmember Ontiveros just mentioned, the one that's kind of at the bottom of the agenda. And so this is the very general one. And if you were to go through all of these various meetings and boards and whatnot, these are the meetings that have been recorded. It uses a certain system that the Climate Emergency Council does not use. We use a specific website that, if you just notice there, I just went and clicked on that list down at Climate Emergency Council here. And it'll take you directly to the Climate Emergency Council's website. And so we've got our own website that you can take to meetings and agendas. You can do sign up for updates, the initial bylaws and resolution that created the Climate Emergency Council. We also have our council members' names posted on one of the web pages. And we have our resources page, which has a number of items that are for general information related to what the Climate Emergency Council does. Where you go to the meetings and agendas, you can find all of the agenda items, including those for our past agenda items for this council. And if you click on any one of these, it tends to be the thumbnail of one of the first speakers. So lately as the chair, that includes Chair Schnapp most of the time. But you can also go to find us directly on YouTube. And you would see that if you, oh, hang on. Sorry, I didn't want to play audio over that. That was not what I was trying to do. But you can go to YouTube itself, and that's where the Climate Emergency Council is actually hosting these. And then when we show that link or that embedded panel, that's actually coming from here. But you can find any number of those things, including some older videos, as well as all the recent videos from the Climate Emergency Council. So those are all there. So we've tried to make that as available and easy to find. And I would say that another part of my update for today is that we are continuing to do the website redesign. We're working with our our Information Technology Services division to do that. And so we're hoping that's going to be available sometime in the near future. We have done a couple of iterations of that with them. So
I have another question.
I'm ready.
Is this material online have a translation feature for anybody who communicates in another language to access?
I don't believe so.
Is there any way that can happen?
I can investigate it, but I can't make any promises about that being available. We don't have alternate language transcription services available that I'm aware of. And I don't think that we have that available for video at this time, but I can look into it.
Or even our materials online? You know how you have a link for translate?
This council has approximately half of one FTE associated with it, and that's me personally. So I don't have those available to me right now. I can look into it, and that will include our materials as well. But doing full translation services, both written and the audio associated with the videos, would be a significant additional work effort that we're not currently scoped for right now, but I will be happy to look into it for you.
I would appreciate looking into it. That'd be great, because we have a whole population that has no access to this, and it would be nice for people to have access. Thank you.
We can absolutely look into it. Thank you.
Okay. So are there any other questions for Clay?
I think the only other ones that I wanted to mention were a few of the meetings. We did have a meeting of the transportation TAC that I participated in. That was on January 6th. We went over to the sustainability division staff, and the TAC members went over to General Services Agency's fleet yard and met with the deputy director of GSA to talk about fleet issues and zero emissions vehicles. Also, I wanted to note that there is a resource management agency notice of availability for funding associated with the tree mitigation fund distribution program. And so approximately every 5 years that goes out. And as a snippet from that announcement, the planning division of the county's resource management agency issued a notice of availability and seeks proposals for projects. Each selected project is going to be eligible to receive funding from the tree mitigation fund in an amount that ranges from $35,000 to $199,000. Selected proposers shall be required to execute a funding contract with the county. At this time, the county estimates a maximum of $928,000 being available for distribution. And so if there's an interest in folks who are in attendance and they have an interest in knowing more about that, they're welcome to reach out to me at the county sustainability office, and I'll forward that information to them.
Okay. We have Councilmember White with his hand up, and then Councilmember.
Yeah, Clay, thank you, Sylvia. Clay, could you explain that again? The money's available coming from what?
So there's a tree mitigation fund that anytime that development, so projects are created where there's a protected tree or some kind of mitigation has to be done associated with removal of a protected species, and that's typically associated with our tree ordinance, then that can go into an in lieu fee program, and that's this tree mitigation fund. And so every 5 years, approximately every 5 years, that distribution occurs of those funds where they do what's essentially a call for proposals to come in and do tree plantings associated with that as part of that mitigation.
And so the county has been giving out money already under this program?
It has occurred previously, although I think it was somewhere between 5 and 7 years ago. So it wasn't exactly 5, it was a little more.
But there's almost $1 million available for tree planting?
It only became available in, I believe, late December. And the window for this for applications closes sometime in February. So this has happened to the best of my knowledge, although I'm not affiliated with this program. I believe it's happened at least once before. It may have happened more times than that.
So this would be something like what's the organization that does the Harmon Canyon Ventura Land Trust, I think.
Ventura Land Trust.
Would the Ventura Land Trust be able to apply for this?
Yes, they would be able to. And the other thing I would say is that one of the staff in the sustainability division has reached out to all the local stakeholders that we're aware of that do this sort of work, and that include a number of organizations. I believe Ventura Land Trust specifically was one of them, to make sure they knew about it. And then the planning division had already done that on their own separately. We just didn't have the same list, so we wanted to make sure we hit those. Some of those folks probably received more than one announcement, but funding availability, people don't usually mind getting those too much.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. Could you please send me personally the link to that? Because I know a number of organizations that I'm pretty sure would be very interested to apply.
Sure, I'll be happy to send that. And if it's okay, I'll send that to the entire council. And
That'd be great.
that way anyone can share it with any organization they like. I'm sure the Resource Management Agency would be happy to get the word out.
Yeah, because planting trees is one of the best things that we can do to reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere.
Absolutely.
And it actually gets to one of the items that we've seen already in the program report, right? I think there was a opportunity for us over the next couple of years to try to plant thousands of trees.
That's right. There's a general plan program, COSH, is a tree planting program where the county commits to plant 1,000 trees per year. And that's tasked jointly to the County Executive Office, Resource Management Agency, and General Services Agency. And so I believe the Resource Management Agency being part of this program is a natural fit to it being part of that general plan program as well. So the County Executive Office and Resource Management Agency and General Services Agency are all talking about those efforts.
Great.
And
okay, so then we have Councilmember Ontiveros. I think you had your hand up as well.
I had those same kind of questions, so I'm good. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
and that's
go
the
ahead.
that's the end of my update. I can take any other questions that you'd like.
Okay, so I'll go to any other questions first from the council members for Clay at this time. And I'm not, yes, go ahead, Councilmember White.
Well, I'm not sure the best time to do it. We do have another issues TAC report. Does that come at a later agenda item? Just let me know when you want that.
I think from the agenda perspective, I think that seems like it would fit with council member updates and those sorts of things, if that would be okay with this council.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And so let's go. Yes, go ahead, Councilmember White.
Just a suggestion that in the future in the agendas, I think it's appropriate that every time we have a meeting, we ask for reports from each of the TACs to notify the rest of the council where we're at.
Thank you. Yeah. And so then with that, we'll have public comments, and it looks like we have Roseanne Witt, who'd like to make a public comment for this item. Item number 9, I believe is where we are. Go
Good,
ahead, Roseanne.
good afternoon. I just had a quick question with regard to the tree mitigation fund and whether or not it provides for tree maintenance or requirements for tree maintenance, as well as for planting, because there's no point in planting trees if they're not subsequently maintained. And that's the end of my question. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to respond to that. Yes, to the best of my knowledge, there are maintenance requirements and reporting requirements associated with that. And I don't know exactly when those end, but those are over multiple years to ensure that there's a survivorship that's being reported amongst those trees that are planted. So those are part of the requirements associated with those applications that maintenance and reporting are addressed.
Okay, thank you. All right, so then let's move on to item number 10, which is proposal to create a climate change public outreach / education program. And this is going to be presented by Councilmember Baldwin. Okay,
Thank
go
you.
ahead. You're welcome.
So not a long time before I got involved with the council, but before I was involved with the Climate Reality Project's leadership program and learning that a lot of people don't know much about climate change. They know less about what to do about it. But within the people that realize there's climate change, there's also some deniers, although it's a much smaller fraction than a majority. But as I watched this and not really paying attention to education as I got on the council and looking at data, realizing that a whole lot of people really don't know what to do about climate change. And a lot of people don't know how it's caused. So I was thinking about that and going back to my days in the Air Pollution Control District and something similar where an EPA report came out shortly after I was hired, announcing something I didn't even know because I came up from San Diego, that Ventura County had the 4th worst ozone. Back then they called it smog, but ozone in the nation. And so I started telling people about that, and industry went crazy, and a couple of my board members started coming after me. What are you talking about? Well, the bottom line is nobody really knew. And so I started addressing it from the technical side, how to clean up the air, and trying to figure out how to deal with people who don't know and deal with the fact that they're part of the problem, these same people. So I created, I got the board to go along with creating a public information program, funding it, hiring someone and putting it together. And if you read the report, that public education and outreach program turned out to be pretty fantastic. Now, that's way behind me because I've been retired 20 years this year. But now I'm in a new mode that happens to be very closely related to air pollution control, at least the emissions of greenhouse gases. It's a part of the mess, the soup. And I don't see any reason in the world why the same concept can't work here with the county. But what we've been charged with in the climate action plan is looking at the unincorporated areas, but really education is countywide. It's got to be countywide. It can't just be in the unincorporated areas, and it should be a uniform message. And I think that an organization like the CEO's office, which kind of covers all bases, could replicate a similar program based on climate change to put education programs forward, to create them and put them out there, just like we did going into schools, grade schools, middle schools primarily, a few high schools, but then a lot of outreach going into the fair, the home and garden show, Earth Day, that there's all kinds of opportunities countywide, different things that some put on by school districts. And we would try to get people out there with materials. And we created materials specifically for schools and then other materials for the public so that they would understand what's going on. And I just think that something similar is needed. When you look at the numbers, 3/4 of the people believe there's climate change, but only half of them understand what it is. And fewer understand what they themselves can do to clean it up. And that change will only come from education. And so I'm just putting forward the idea that we recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they create a similar climate action or climate change education program, call it what you will, that it's education and outreach for the public in schools and at large, like Kiwanis, Lions, and these people meet. Well, they haven't been meeting too much in the last couple of years, but once this virus gets over, there'll be plenty of opportunities for meeting again with people and educating them. We used to go out and talk to a number of these organizations almost annually. Go out, 30 or so different ones each year, just in the Kiwanis type group. So I'll be glad to answer any questions, but that's my recommendation, is that we try to educate the people who are causing the problem. Let me rephrase that. They're not the sole cause of the problem, but they're a source of greenhouse gases that's contributing to the problem. I think it would be better stated. And try to bring this whole thing together and let everybody do something to reduce their footprint. I'll be
Okay,
glad to answer any questions.
all right, thank you, Councilmember Baldwin. So any questions? I think I did see Councilmember White's hand up. Go ahead.
Wow, Dick, this is just such a great idea. I applaud you for bringing this to the CEC. This is very important, and if you had made a motion to do this, I would have seconded the motion. Probably you have to flesh it out according to the evaluation criteria document that Mick and Maggie put together. But I think it's wonderful. Congratulations on bringing this forward.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Councilmember Ontiveros.
Thank you for bringing this up and getting it on the agenda. This is wonderful. I really appreciate it. It's kind of like you were reading my mind. And as long as we incorporate other languages and other cultures, and then also be honest about the fact that people who have been here on this land for over 250 years actually lived in conjunction with the climate without creating a lot of environmental destruction. And so we need to learn from the people who still live like that and who have been living like that and who take into account the life that exists on this earth. So as long as we have a way of acknowledging that and working with it, and having those people who live like that feel like they're part of the conversation and that they do have answers to some of these problems that we have. I think that would be awesome. And, I think people are always looking toward how they can be part of the solution. And it's really hard to be part of the solution. I myself have tried to be part of the solution, and just acknowledge the fact that, we're humans and we create problems, but we also have the ability to fix it. And so I'm just really glad that I'm here to see that we're working on fixing this thing. So yes, I do commend you and applaud you. And I'm really glad that I'm with a group of people who care about this, because we care about life itself. So thank you very much. And yeah, awesome. Let's get it out there.
Commenting on the language translations, we didn't do all languages, but we did have Spanish because there's a rather large Hispanic population in Ventura County. Over in the South Coast Air Basin, where they have Asians a large Asian population. Some of their outreach stuff is also in Asian languages. It can be, whoever the program lands with would be the ones would be the one who's going to figure out how to create these documents and then what languages to put them in to get distributed where. I hadn't taken it that far. I would be happy just to see it get started. I think the sustainability division would be a perfect landing spot for this to happen because they've got the resource. Well, they don't have the resources, but they have the knowledge and the desire and the drive to carry something forward. They're capable of thinking on, and they can pick my brain all they want and others. That letter that you read was put together by myself and two of my former staff members. I still have people working for me, so they work for food. So they come over and we eat and drink and have a good time and talk about climate change nowadays. Anyway, be glad to answer any more questions.
Yeah, radio is an awesome communication medium. And I know that, like, for instance, my COP, they do radio in Mixteco. And so, I mean, it's Spanish, yes, of course, but, I'm thinking of the Tagalog speaking population that we have in the county. And we have a diversity, and we just need to acknowledge that we have a wonderful diversity that, I think acknowledging that some of us do live sustainably and then some of us don't, but you know what? We need to come together and create a healing space for all of us to be able to work together and not criticize each other, but just, acknowledge that we all want good things for each other. So thank you.
And so I do have a question, maybe more of a comment, but knowing that this group is formed to represent the entire county and to actually be on point to go through the plan like we've done, and we have tasks that are associated, would it be better or an idea to drive this idea through a TAC so that it actually becomes one of those recommendations that goes to the planning commission and then to planning department and then to the board of supervisors before year end? Could it actually fit under a TAC that we currently have now, so that there would be that kind of formality, but also then the checks that we've made in order for this group to succeed and the guidelines that we've been given, as well as the outcomes that we want to see? So
that could happen. I'm not sure. I wasn't thinking of putting that much meat in. I was going to put the CEO's office, put the nitty gritty into it. As I said earlier, they have the expertise to do that kind of thing. What's needed is a motivation from the board of supervisors that makes a commitment to, number one, do it, and number two, fund it. Without those two things, it's dead. It's dead.
So then with regards to our group, that's actually part of our planning and, the effort from this group is that we put together recommendations to the board of supervisors, i.e. then the CAO's office, for what we feel is important for them to adopt in terms of climate emergency council recommendations.
That is my recommendation, is to take it to the board of supervisors.
Yeah.
And you're suggesting that we put more meat to it, more specifics?
That we drive it through either a TAC or create a TAC that would actually then drive it so that we can check the box knowing that we have at least this recommendation that we're moving forward so that it goes to the planning department and then to the board of supervisors. There is a process that we take, and I don't want to circumvent the process, but I do want to work within the context of this committee and why we were formed. And so I would suggest that we would drive it through a TAC so it follows then the recommendations we need to make that finally go to the board of supervisors for adoption and implementation, moving that forward.
My recollection is we're only supposed to be on one TAC, and I'm on attack. And so I've got this thing nailed in my brain for 20, 30 years. So I just pushed it out of my brain. If we want to take it to attack, you know, what do? I can't be in two tacks, or at least that's my understanding. What's the solution here?
So does it easily fall within one TAC that's already created? And I know that we have the discussion coming about that in the next item.
My
So-
point being that I'm on the transportation TAC.
Yeah.
So if we stick with you can only be on one TAC, then I got to go one way or the other. I would probably, I don't know what I'd do. I guess I'd drop out of the transportation TAC.
So what we can't, you know, part of what we can do is we can only serve on one TAC, but if we have information that we want to get to the others, I believe Clay is a conduit, as well as then sharing it with, like what you're doing today is exactly what we can also do. But I feel that you have such rich experience in this area that it could possibly be one of those things that we may want to reassign you, or you may want to be reassigned. Just
We won a ton of awards for what we did.
Yeah, just a suggestion of, you know, making sure that we allow these, you know, really great discussions, but also then an opportunity to go back to the basics of who we are and what we're charged to do through this. And so I think I see, okay, so open it up for public comment. Phil, you have a comment here, and then we'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. Well, the way I look at this council that we're on, this council was created by the Board of Supervisors to advise it on actions that it meaning the Board of Supervisors could take to address climate change and help the county achieve its goals of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and all aspects of climate change. And that's really what I see our job is to come up with the ideas and recommendations that aren't already in the county's climate action plan. County's climate action plan is very thorough, has many policies and programs addressing climate change. It doesn't have everything, and there are things that I think the board is looking to our group to do to advise them, hey, here's some other ideas that you could do to help address climate change. I don't think we're limited to exclude what Dick has come forward with. I think it's an excellent idea. I don't think we need to send it off to TAC or create a new TAC. The idea stands on its own. We're talking about it in the complete council meeting. I'm of the opinion that if Dick brings forward, fleshes it out so that it meets the evaluation criteria that Mick and Maggie put together and that we're bound by now, that's good enough. Dick has a lot to offer. Transportation is one that I know he is dear to his heart, and it would be a shame to insist that he not deal with transportation issues. So anyway, bottom line, I don't see a problem with an individual council member coming to the full council with an idea and moving it forward.
Okay, thanks. Let's go ahead. Well, Councilmember Ferris, and then we'll get to public comments, but we do need public comments in this, so go ahead.
Thanks. I did just want to, I think, align with Chair Schnapp's thoughts on, at a minimum, doing the work necessary to help provide any particular recommendation that we would want to forward to the board, as having some of the, reviewing it relative to the evaluation criteria, because it ends up helping us as a council evaluate that recommendation, as well as the board being able to say, look, here's the proposal. We've evaluated with things which we think are important for you to make a decision, likelihood of success, the impact it would have, here's how much it would cost, that kind of thing. If we don't follow that, then we will basically be doing a lot of scattershot things. Whether it goes to attack or not, it doesn't matter to me, but I don't think we should forward any recommendations unless, one, we have those set out relative to the criteria, and two, this council can review that to be able to say, yes, I agree with that, and that we can do it. So as Councilmember White said, whether it comes from attack or whether it comes from any individual one, it doesn't matter as much to me as having a bit more detail behind every proposal so that we can evaluate it well and consistently to the board. In line with that, and maybe for a later discussion, I would be genuinely interested to kind of know the calendar of when we're expecting to have a bulk of recommendations sent to the board, because I'm now that we're like working, I don't have a sense of when done is, or when we start bringing things up. So that's for a later discussion, but that's in general this specific comment on Dick's proposal.
So thank you, Councilmember Ferris, because that last idea that you had is actually part of our next couple of comments. And I wanted to make sure that Clay was able to bring back to us, okay, so the ETA is out here, but when do we get it to the planning department in order to move it forward, et cetera. Yeah, okay. So with that, let's go ahead and see if we have any public comments for this item. We're still on item number 10. And I see Don Price, so go ahead, Don.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to support Mr. Baldwin's idea. Outreach and education on climate issues is very important. So I hope the council will pursue it. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And any other comments from the general public for this item number 10? Yes, I see Allison Mayers. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to just say again, echoing Don Price, that I support Dick Baldwin in this. It's been almost 30 years ago, Dick, I was public information officer for Ventura Regional Sanitation District, as we were part of the consortium that worked with the Air Pollution Control District. I can't remember it seems to me Edison, there was a whole group, a consortium that developed the kindergarten through 5th grade Think Earth curriculum that Dick is referring to as part of that, which was given an award by the EPA at that time. And then, of course, being able to see all the other programs that the Air Pollution Control District did in terms of outreach and development. I just want to caution, after having spent the last 25 years in a classroom teaching science, that there's a lot of other curriculums out there, a lot of other things that we wouldn't want to be reinventing. Some of this, I think we would have to perhaps go to Ventura County Office of Education and ask them for a survey of what's already out there that could be used. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from, or anything else from the public? Don't see any others raising hands. Okay. So Councilmember Baldwin, thank you for bringing this up to our group. And how would you all like to proceed? I think it's a great idea. But I want to make sure that we run it through what we're charged to do here as a committee.
If I can take just a second to respond to the comment just made about working with the school. We definitely had to work with the schools, and it was a challenge at times. The teachers are hit with all kinds of great ideas to teach, and they only have so many hours to teach it. So it's a challenge, and you have to work with it. But we did. The county could. I think it can work, but it will take some effort.
Okay. You know, a question for Clay. Clay, don't we have this program where on Facebook and some of the social media, we have something going on every Thursday, or that was the idea?
So at least perhaps you're referencing the sustainability division, and we were doing sustainability Sundays. There's a different staffer that she's mostly remote. I'm not sure exactly what the schedule is. We've somewhat reduced it. It was hard for us to get the content amongst people's other priorities up on a weekly basis, but I believe that we're still doing contributions either every 2 weeks or every month or something along those lines. So we are still doing sustainability posts in coordination with the Public Information Office.
Okay, thanks. So where do we go from here, Commissioner?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways I want to get to like, how do we get to the next step, which is the proposal itself would be evaluated against the criteria so that the council can review the proposal in context of those things that we've said are important. Whether that is a TAC, whether it says we ask a TAC to do that, or we ask Councilmember Baldwin to do that, it doesn't matter to me. I guess I just want to figure out like, how do we get to there? Because the end goal has to be, we have more information about the proposal so that we can evaluate it and determine as a council whether it should go to the next step. Is that a fair way to think about this?
I think it's pretty fair.
Okay.
And so, well, if we can move to then, would it be the next item here? 11, could we consider it as if it falls under attack, or if Councilmember Baldwin just, you know, puts those elements together based on evaluation criteria and brings it back to the full group without it being assigned to attack? And maybe, I think I see that as 2 options that we may have here. Clay, what do you think would be the best way to go about this?
Well, there are a couple of hands raised from the various council members. I saw Councilmember Baldwin's go up, and then I saw either
And
Councilmember White or
White.
Ontiveros. But I do think that the council can choose to vote today on the proposal as it's presented. The council can also ask for it to be modified and come back until you get it just the way that you're comfortable with, and then it gets moved forward. But I did include the memo that was shared with the council, I think back in September, that goes through those steps of what we expect. And some of that is a council member or a TAC creating language, presenting that language to the Climate Emergency Council. The Climate Emergency Council as a body approves that, and then it goes forward from there. Staff would take that recommendation, and we're not going to change it, so it has to be the way the council wants it, and it goes to the Planning Commission. And after it goes to the Planning Commission, it goes to the Board of Supervisors. So that is a multi-step process. There's a regular occurring number of Planning Commission meetings, but you do have to get on the agenda when they've got an opening, and then after that, we would have to get on the board's agenda. So.
Okay, so let's go with the those that raise their hands. So Councilmember Baldwin, Councilmember White, and then Councilmember Ontiveros.
I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know how this fits in with the TAC concept, but how do I say this? So I'm going to bash myself, I guess, but I'm not much of a bureaucrat. I had a bunch of staff that did all that stuff, and I just threw out ideas and said, make it happen. So I hate the bureaucracy side of this whole business, but I'd be willing to work with one of the 2 people that put the criteria together if they're interested. And we can create a tax, and if I have to, I'll just drop off the transportation tax or go on hold with the transportation tax. Although I don't want to, maybe Daniel can carry it forth. He knows what to do. But since we had two people that created the criteria, I'd be more than pleased to take their guidance on whacking out the criteria.
I see what you're doing here.
I'm serious about that.
Maybe
If
that's
I
not
can,
a bad approach.
I don't know
Maybe
if I
we
can do it, if I'm allowed to. The game is, I don't know this game that well.
Fair enough. Councilmember White.
Yeah, thank you, Sylvia. Well, I would just like to reiterate what Mick said, that it doesn't matter whether a good proposal comes from a TAC or an individual, that there ought to be at least those two ways of bringing good ideas forward to be evaluated by our group and on to the Planning Commission and on to the board, hopefully, using the evaluation criteria that Mick and Maggie put together. And if we need to clarify that issue as a group, I would move that it would be the policy of the CEC to accept proposals either from tax or individuals, understanding that the evaluation criteria would need to be met because we've already voted on that. So I would make that motion.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. So let's see, we need a roll call vote, I believe. Oh, I think you're muted. Sorry.
I want to make sure I got that correctly. Councilmember White, would you mind saying that again? The motion is to ensure that proposals come from either tax or individuals and that they use the evaluation criteria guidelines. Is that?
I think that's pretty good. It's hard for me to remember everything I've said always, but basically that the CEC policy adopts the policy that specific proposals can come from either an individual or a TAC to the full CEC, understanding that either way they need to be work with the evaluation criteria. That makes sense?
Yep, it does. I'm just writing that down to make sure that I'm following that. And okay. With that, we'll go ahead and conduct the roll vote. So starting with Councilmember White.
Aye.
Thank you. Councilmember Ferris.
Aye.
Chair Schnapp.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Ontiveros.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Garola.
Aye.
And Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously, those that are here.
Okay. All right.
May I ask just a follow-up question? It's not going to change my vote at all of this. In some ways, saying this another way, the expectation is that if there is a proposal that the council considers to go forward, to be presented to the council for consideration, you need to bring forward your evaluation, the proposal relative to the evaluation criteria. That lets us be able to evaluate it in a more official way. Is that a fair way to characterize the motion we just approved?
That was, yes, that was my intent, Mick.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So let's see. So then are we done with item number 10? I think. We
Let
just
me-
addressed like how to handle items like this in general moving forward. But I want to make sure that we as a group kind of identify where how we're gonna take care of this one really important thing of public outreach and awareness. So
May I offer a recommendation on how to tie this one up and potentially move forward? So one of the things I like Councilmember Baldwin's suggestion of wrestling at least one of us into this, just to kind of test this out, to say, hey, I've got a proposal, I know what it is. Why? Yeah, exactly. And then we can walk through it, just kind of as an example. This is the first test case where I'm happy to work with Councilmember Baldwin to do that. Whether it is informally through him bringing it forward or formally through attack, we can decide in the next agenda item how to handle that. Does that sound like a fair way to kind of close the discussion off for this and then move forward to the next one?
it does for me. I just want to make sure that, that everybody feels comfortable that we're just punting it and taking care of it in item number 11. Councilmember Baldwin, do you think that that sounds
Oh, I
reasonable
think
to
it's
you?
great. I could tell you that this had less meat when I first submitted it to Clay than afterward. He pointed out I needed to address these other things that you're talking about, like criteria. All I was trying to do is put forward the notion that there ought to be an education program. It ought to be funded, and it probably should sit in the CEO's office. That's really my point. But we can flesh it out. I can actually, I've already thought through some things, like if I was Mike Powers, what would I do, kind of thing, and how would I do it? And we can get into the meat. I wasn't planning on getting into the meat. But we can. But when you get in the meat, then you really need to look at the criteria. And that's my weak spot is matching the criteria.
That's okay. I can help. I know a little bit about the criteria.
I'm sure you do.
All right, thank you.
But I'd be,
Go ahead. Councilmember Baldwin, were you still speaking? I know that I saw
no,
Councilmember
Councilmember
Brawl.
Barlow
Okay.
raised his
Councilmember
hand.
Barlow.
He's got a question or a point or something.
Yeah, so Sylvia, this probably be more for Clay as for the process. So, and Dick, you had mentioned that, as far as throwing out concepts and having staff run with it and come up with a final product, I think you alluded to that. And that would be my question to Clay is the deliverables that we give from this committee, are we looking at vetting them out completely with a lot of substance, or the concept here that we're talking about, the educational concept, can we just move that forward, or would we want to move that forward with a lot of additional substance to that content and so forth?
I would strongly recommend that the council provide all the level of detail that they're capable of doing and the exact language that you would want to see in a document, because where these are going to land is in the climate action plan, which is in the general plan. And it is a bit of a process to amend a general plan and do those things. And maybe rightfully or not, you might consider, I would not recommend that your council give staff the discretion to change things. You want to propose what you want to propose. You don't want me as staff, as well-intentioned as I might be, to change things because you might not like it and that's not what you signed off on. So I would strongly recommend that as you want it to move forward, that is how it's presented as a proposal, so that it can be adopted by the council, so that everyone can agree it looks great, and that it can then move forward. And as staff, then I can go through the work efforts of taking that from your council to a planning commission hearing, presenting it, giving them some context and saying, this is the proposal, this is what it includes, this is how it was discussed, this is how the Climate Emergency Council works. They make whatever comments they're going to make. They don't get to change it because it's not their proposal, but they can make comments on it. Those comments would then go along with your proposal and would go to the Board of Supervisors when I present it to the Board of Supervisors, and I would go through that process again on behalf of the council. And since we haven't done this before, there may be some aspects of that I don't know if the chair or someone else from the council might want to participate in the way that it's presented to the council. I think that we could talk about that if your group wants, but typically I would foresee it just being basically presented by staff as what it is, which is a policy recommendation or a policy and program recommendation that's going to result in likely a general plan amendment. So I would say bake it and get as many details as you can would be my recommendation to the council.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so then with that, let's go ahead and move on to item number 11, the discussion and modification of the tax temporary advisory committees
And-
for this.
Chair, I think we may have Councilmember Hernandez with us. Galaxy, yes. Okay, got it. I
Oh,
wasn't
great,
sure if that
okay.
was you. I thought it
Yes.
probably was. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so let's go ahead and go on to item number 11.
Okay. All right. So what I wanted to do was a very short presentation that is really just a couple of slides on the item that's in front of us. And it's really very short. And then if there's any questions or gaps, your council can ask those. If there's public comments, we can receive those. And then I actually have a slide at the end of mine that I can essentially modify live if you do want to make any changes to the layout or composition of the tax in any way. So if that's the case, we've got a space for that. But the presentation slides and all of these things will be made available to the public afterwards. The presentation slides will be put up there. And if you decide to make any revisions or changes through those will be captured and those will be made available to the public as well. So let me go ahead and pull up that presentation for everyone. All right, can everyone, Chair Schnapp, can you see my PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and move forward with this. So what we're doing is we're talking primarily about the tax as they're currently composed and any modifications that you want to make with them. This is coming forward in part because of we dissolved the evaluation criteria tax. So we have two VCCEC members that are not on a TAC right now. These are the bylaws. We've discussed them a little bit in the last item, but there's some basics associated with this. So the VCCEC has the ability to create these tasks that are intended for a limited or single focus task. They're going to consist of less than a quorum of the VCCEC, so they need to be less than 5 people. They're not going to meet on a regular scheduled basis, and they're going to be dissolved when their task is complete, and they will not be subject to the Brown Act because of some of those things, because they don't have a quorum, because they're not regularly occurring, because they're not permanent. Any VCCEC member shall only be on one TAC at a time, and members of any given TAC will not discuss TAC business with other VCCEC members. All right, now tax and TAC membership. These are the TACs that we have remaining. There's only 3 of them. So if you remember, we had the evaluation criteria TAC, which has since been dissolved, I believe back in either November or December meeting. And then we have the agriculture TAC, which currently I believe has 3 people on it, the transportation TAC, which has 2 people on it, and the other issues TAC, which has 2 people on it, or 3 people on it. And of those, the agriculture TAC was going to focus on soil productivity and agricultural waste reuse within the agricultural sector. The transportation TAC was going to focus on issues related to electric vehicle infrastructure and deployment. So that's, again, in the transportation TAC. These were the initial topics. Obviously, we would expect that as they conduct research as a working group, these may change some and they can report back. And then the other issues TAC was shaped a little differently than the other ones. They reported during the November meeting. that they had a couple of different issues that they were going to be working on, primarily stationary sources, and that tends to include oil and gas industry activities, building energy, and solid waste. And as Councilmember White noted in our review of the draft agenda item or the draft minutes, there are specific emissions that they're looking into both for building energy as new and existing building energy, and then with methane emissions, particularly those for stationary sources and solid waste. So that is.
Hey, this is Phil. Could I interrupt you and ask you to put back the first slide,
The title slide or the one with the bylaws?
the previous one?
I think it's the bylaws.
Yeah, the bylaws.
Okay.
I just want to point out, because it seems like you're gunning for the other issues tack here. And I just want to point out what the bylaws say, that the tax exists to address either have a limited or a single focus. And looking at what we're doing on the other issues tack is a limited focus. We're limited to the things that are not being addressed by the other tax, namely agriculture and vehicular sources. I think that what we're doing fits perfectly within the bylaws. Because of the word limited, we are limited. We're not talking about agriculture and we're not talking about vehicles. So I just want to point that out.
So if I can respond to that, I would say that, and partially I want to give some context. I believe what Councilmember White is referring to is the recommendation that I put in the memo that the council consider creating a new TAC, and that creation of that TAC would pull one of the issues out of the other issues TAC and create a new TAC out of it.
Which
and
one
I will,
do you want to pull out?
I didn't make that recommendation because I don't have a strong preference one way. And let me explain before you jump in there. So the other issues TAC has identified that there are 3 areas that are of highest interest to them. And I think that is perfectly reasonable. But to me, what that creates potentially is a queue. Each one of those sectors is an entire emissions sector that is comprised of many different activities. So it's a rather broad scope compared to the other 2 areas. And I'm not contesting that the bylaws do or do not allow it, because the Climate Emergency Council has already created it. This is simply a recommendation on how to proceed, because one of our TACs was dissolved. And then there are 2 council members that are no longer on a TAC. So it is just one direction, and the council can choose whether or not to pursue that, but that is staff's recommendation.
Why are you recommending this?
Primarily because I think it's a good idea. But further than that, further than me simply thinking it's a good idea, it makes sense because the council has already decided that these are priority areas of interest. And it'll narrow what one small working group works on and then prioritize what another group gets to work on. So theoretically, you're taking more bites out of those issue areas that we've already said are important. So that, to me, is why that's important, as opposed to bringing in a whole new topic area that the Climate Emergency Council had not identified as of highest and most important priority. So to me, it was an issue of prioritization. But this council is welcome to ignore that recommendation and do what they think is most appropriate.
Haven't we already done that? I mean, we've beat this thing up over 2 or 3 meetings already and established the tax that we have now. I understand that Mick and Maggie might want to jump to another tax since the evaluation criteria was discontinued. I understand that makes sense, or create a new one. That I can understand that as well. But to tear apart what we've already established, I think it's outrageous.
And I have no idea to what extent and what detail your TAC has worked on that. And I would say that is, You're welcome to explain that to the council members. So are the other TAC members. Your TAC is one of the ones where I haven't sat on those meetings, so I don't know in great detail what level of interconnectivity there may be between building emissions, stationary sources, and waste in the research that you're doing. So if there is that where it makes sense to keep it all together, I would say share that with the council. Staff's recommendation is there, but I don't know what the best pathway for this council is. I would suggest that the council needs to make that decision for themselves. And I welcome that input that you don't agree with the recommendation that I have put forward as a staff member.
Okay, so Clay, do you want to go through then the rest of this?
Absolutely.
Mhm.
So the other pieces of this is just citing the various TACs that we have currently created and that are working on issues. And the next slide is simply one that frames up the composition in kind of a dashboard, kind of a method to show that. And this is really the last piece of content that I have. There is a final slide that I have available. I'm going to skip past this questions one and go straight to this, where if your group decides you want to make any changes of any kind, whether that is to membership, whether that is creating a new TAC, it could be creating one out of the education topic or any number of other issues, then we can track that here. And then when this presentation gets posted, that proposed membership and composition will get posted to kind of make sure that stays updated and known to all parties. So as far as staff presentation on materials and information, that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any further questions that the VCCEC might have.
Okay, so let's have any questions that the council members may have with regards to this item. Go ahead, Councilmember White.
Thank you, Sylvia. Well, Maggie's not here in the meeting, but Mick is, and I would put a question to Mick. What do you want to do? Do you want to be on a TAC or create a new one?
Sorry. One of the things that I'm genuinely the most interested in is ensuring we have the ability to use our collective council resources as best as possible to get recommendations back to the council with the right background information and provide something forward if we think it needs to get done. And I'm personally taking what Clay has provided as a recommendation as a positive way to parallel path some activities where there's agriculture, there's transportation, and then there's other. If there's an opportunity to have one more parallel path of working, I actually think I see that as a potential benefit, not necessarily anything different, because from what I remember, the agricultural, transportation, the other three areas were identified as clearly the 5 largest contributors to greenhouse gases. And for that reason, it's worth our time to really investigate those well. So I think, and again, Councilmember Baldwin sort of brought something up that doesn't neatly fit into anything except for maybe the other TAC, which is an education campaign, which I don't disagree with. I think I would just want to be able to help put together some of those details so that we can start moving forward with those things. I don't necessarily know if that needs to, the question here for this council would be, in order to do that for me and Councilmember Baldwin to work together, does that require a TAC? Or can we meet together potentially with Clay's help to flesh that out for Councilmember Baldwin and present it together? I mean, I'm trying to figure out, are there temporary TACs?
As long as there's not a Brown Act violation associated with your activities, we can certainly have meetings, working meetings, those sorts of things. So those are not a TAC unless this body makes it a TAC. One of the things, if you recall from the Brown Act trainings that were done early in kind of the process of forming this council, would be that we have to ensure that we're not doing things behind closed doors.
Mhm.
And part of that is making sure that there is no communication that's going from one council member to another council member to another council member. So if one or two council members want to have a discussion about a topic and then it ends up it goes to an agenda like an education program, to the best of my understanding, that is an acceptable way of approaching the work that's being done by the Climate Emergency Council. But particularly if a TAC is not being formed, there needs to be an understanding that we will do everything possible to ensure that we're not doing a behind closed doors kind of a meeting with those sorts of things. And I think that the TACs are intended to be a formalized and recognized way that there's an ongoing work group. But if it's really you're having some meetings to talk about, did this do enough? Did we make this proposal the right way? And it's just a one-on-one conversation. You're not violating a quorum issue. You're not communicating ex parte outside of that to other members of this council. Then I think you would be able to avoid a Brown Act violation. If we have some concerns about that, though, before having such a meeting, I would be happy to speak with county council and make sure my interpretation is correct.
And that would actually then we wouldn't have to create a new TAC in order to take care of the overarching like public information program idea.
If county council concurs that it's acceptable to essentially have a meeting with two council members and a staff member and there's no violation there, as long as they don't do any further communications outside of public meetings, then it would be an acceptable way of addressing it.
And I'm genuinely sensitive to that because the one thing it looks like is a real barrier is that our bylaws do not allow for a member of the council to sit on more than one officially recognized TAC. And if that weren't there and we could work with it, then a lot of these things wouldn't be issues. I don't want them to get in the way of us doing our public business. So.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I see Councilmember White's hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Sylvia. Clay, you mentioned bringing this to county council for an interpretation, I guess, of the bylaws. And I think it's a good idea. And I also reached out this morning when I read your recommendation to dissolve our TAC or to modify it. And I think that he needs to be asked that question because the full council has already acted on the creation of the existing tax, agriculture, vehicles, and other issues. We've established and approved the composition of these tax. And for you to come in now saying that the bylaws don't allow that, I think is incorrect. But I would be happy to comply with whatever the county council says. I know Jeff Barnes from working on the planning commission. He's a clear thinker. And if he says, no, you can't do what you're doing, I would be happy to comply, but I think we're doing the right thing. I know we've talked about this probably too much. We voted on it a couple of times. So I think that if we're going to talk to county council, we ask him that question. Are we violating our bylaws to have the other issues TAC work on the three items that we were told to, the three areas that we were told to come back to the council with?
So Phil, if I can address your statement and then kick it off to, I see Clay's hand up and then Councilman Ferris, is that my understanding of when we formed this other TAC was that there could be other ideas that come up from not necessarily those key items that we all took a look at and prioritized as we went through a couple of really big meetings we had several months back. I was under the understanding that your TAC would identify some of those other things that would need to be discussed, but maybe not keep it within this other TAC, but if they needed to be reassigned to a TAC to take care of, then that's what it was. I didn't think that your group was going to, you know, bring about discussion of everything else that didn't fit into these other TACs. So that was my understanding. And I could be wrong, but I just want, you know, and it could be a back and forth thing for the rest of the meeting. And I don't necessarily want to do that, but I just want to see that I have my opinion too, based on what I think we had identified at that time. So just a few more minutes and then we'll go to Clay and then Councilmember Ferris. Go ahead, Councilmember White.
It's just a request to Clay, if you could put up the dashboard again of the TAC composition.
I'm happy to do that. Chair, did you want us to, before I start screen sharing, did you want us to finish some of the other items? And
Yeah, so
I know
you have
Councilmember
your
Ferris
hand
had
up, Clay, and then Councilmember Ferris.
Yeah, I wanted to note two things. And so if I wasn't clear on this previously, I apologize, but I am not contesting that the TAC, the other issues TAC, is appropriate. It is fine, in my opinion, and in the interpretation of our county council, that it exists. So I'm not proposing that there's a problem with it existing. And I haven't done that in any of the materials that I've provided to this council. If it was explained in a way that it seemed like there was a problem with it per the bylaws, I apologize. But, and county council responded and put this in response earlier, that the composition of the temporary advisory councils is an issue within the discretion of and to be decided by the council, which means it was created by this council and it can be further modified by the council. They are not intended in any way to be permanent. But that doesn't mean that anything now is wrong if they get changed. It just means the situation has changed, just like the dissolution of the evaluation criteria TAC. And so with that, that was all the further comment I wanted to say. I have no problem with the TACs in their current form, but if the council wants to make any changes, they're certainly at liberty to do so as a council.
Okay, so go ahead, Councilmember Ferris.
I agree with everything Clay said. That's what I was going to say. That's the way I've interpreted it. That's the way I think that we should consider it. And if the decision of the council that we do not want to make any changes, we have that complete discretion. But if we decide that it is best for our ability to do our work and do what we need to do for the board, then we can make those changes. And we shouldn't be afraid nor, you know, feel like it's an affront. I think we've got work to do. We should focus on the work.
Okay. So let's go ahead if there aren't any other questions from other council members. Were there any public comments to be made on this item? We're still on item number 11. So does anybody have their hand up or take themselves off the mute? Okay, seeing none then. So continuing on with where we want to be, can you show that the tax distribution right now as we stand? So as we get to two things, one is the item coming from item number 10, which is how we treat then the public information. I know that there's a better term that we had used. The proposal from Councilmember Baldwin. So we can, sounds like do one of two things, is that we consider it so that there is not necessarily a new TAC form, but there's continued discussion between Councilmember Baldwin and Councilmember Ferris with Clay to evaluate based on the evaluation criteria that had been adopted by our group and come back with the recommendation that clearly will then be one of those things that go to the Planning Commission and then the Board of Supervisors, but really hammer everything out in that way. Then what that does is it allows both Councilmember Baldwin to stay on the Transportation Commission, and then Councilmember Ferris to select a new council or new tack that he would like to work on. So that was the leftover from item number 10 to deal with now. And would there be a motion? I would entertain a motion for that.
I'll move that. That's
Okay.
it's effectively that we would not be reassigning nor creating new tax, but with the guidance that myself and Councilmember Baldwin will work with Clay, subject to advice from the county council's office, and potential would it mean that we would then reevaluate any assignments or divisions potentially at another meeting?
If it were to come back that we couldn't do that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So is there a second? So Councilmember
Hernandez
White.
is seconded.
Oh, okay. So Councilmember Hernandez seconded that. All right. So let's go ahead and take the roll call for this.
All right. And Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Chair Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros,
Yes.
Councilmember Corolla.
Aye, yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Hernandez.
Aye.
Thank you. And Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
All right. So then as to what was proposed here, if there are folks like Councilmember Ferris that want to move on to a new tack so that's one item. And then the other item too would be is going back to Clay's understanding and dealing with then the other issues, tack if we needed to take some of those issues and create a new tack. So those are the remaining two other things we have for item number 11.
Didn't we just vote on that?
No, we just voted on the fact that Councilmember Baldwin's proposal would be dealt with in a different way and not setting up a new tack, and it would be Councilmember Baldwin, Ferris, and Clay working together on that issue about the public outreach and publicity.
May I offer a path forward on one of the items?
Yes.
Given that we've got particular direction on a specific proposal, and I'll work with Councilmember Baldwin on that. I would prefer not to have to try and make a choice about attack at this time, given I think it would be good to just try and work this out between now and the next meeting. And then that would give us an opportunity to assess whether there should be a new tack, which one should that be, and potentially what the composition of it would be. Would that be okay to defer any action on my assignment to a specific tack until the future meeting?
Sounds like if we lump both of them together and just get feedback from county council, I think that's maybe the next step that Clay was going to take. So that sounds like it's reasonable. Councilmember Baldwin, you have your hand up.
I think that with help from an expert on criteria, I don't see much change in substance, so that I don't think it needs to go to create a tack to do this, really. But I'll accept the fact that we need to look at the criteria, which is not my cup of tea, let's say. And I'm willing to, hoping for getting good advice on, okay, look at all of these things. I think this thing can be wrapped up and brought back. Well, I don't know what Mr. Ferris thinks, but I think it can go quick.
Okay.
Hopefully before you have a chance to talk about whether or not it should be a tack.
Right.
All right. So that sounds pretty reasonable, where we just defer to the next meeting after hearing back from county council. That would be fine. Okay. And we don't need to make this as a motion.
I don't
Yeah.
think a further motion. I mean, it sounds like we have folks have their tax that they're already on. Councilmember Ferris would have a work objective pending a conversation with County Council, and Councilmember Kessley is not here today. So I think that if your council is ready, we could probably move on from this, and any further discussion can happen next month.
Okay, great. So let's go ahead and move on to item number 12. And that's receive and file information regarding impacts of animal husbandry activities on greenhouse gas emissions in Ventura County. And so let's move into that.
All right.
presentation.
Sure. So again, this will be also a relatively short one. So this is just a complement to the memo that was sent out to the group. Although obviously if there's further discussion that pops up following this, then I would welcome that. But we had a question about the impact animal husbandry as an activity and its impacts on greenhouse gas emissions in Ventura County specifically. So that's what we were trying to respond to in creating this memo and presenting it to the group. So I'll just go over a couple of slides, and it's only 4 or 5 slides, and then we'll kind of come back, but it's really just intended to wrap up and provide a little extra context perhaps. So with that, we're looking at what are those greenhouse gas emissions, what are the animal husbandry activities, and how do they connect to each other? And so we're looking at specifically agricultural sector emissions. When we look at our greenhouse gas emissions inventory that is a part of Appendix B in part of our climate action plan, it says that just over 260,000, almost 261,000 metric tons of CO2 equivalent emissions out of 1.9 billion metric tons, or 13.5% of those emissions come from the agricultural sector. But like any of the sectors, there are multiple activities that are wrapped up in that sector's emissions that make that up. So here's the pie as we kind of look at it. And I think that most of you are probably familiar with this already, but that's what we see in one of the charts in Appendix B when we talk about our greenhouse gas emissions reductions. And so we see that there are several sectors, and I would say agriculture, stationary sources, solid waste, building energy, they're orders of magnitude, they're kind of in the neighborhood with each other. Agriculture is a little less than those other 3, but they're significant pieces of the pie. But if we take that agricultural sector, that slice out, and we looked at it, what we see is that there are several activities that are captured in there. And this is where you'll get attachment 1 to Appendix B, which is the technical documentation associated with the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. And we see several different activities that are quantified here. And those that are most directly related to animal husbandry, and this is what the memo states too, is that those that I included when I did that analysis would be manure management and enteric fermentation. And so those 2 would be slightly less than 5% of the 13.5% of the overall emissions. But we do see some other activities that make up larger percentages of this agricultural pie. So that would be, for example, the fertilizer applications, and some of the other items there are other sorts of applications that you can have. Urea fertilization is another type, but it's specific. Lime application isn't a fertilizer, it's a type of application or adjunct that you would add in areas. And for anyone not familiar with the term, that one at the top there that says residue burn, that is agricultural burning. And then we have a few other activities that make up some of those other pieces, like you can see pesticide in the lower right-hand portion of this slide, as well as agricultural pumps and specifically diesel that are there. So those are not ones that are electric, those are diesel specifically. So those would be some of the pieces as activities go and those direct contributions to our GHG inventory. But the other item that's mentioned in that memorandum that I wanted to bring up is animal husbandry as a piece of the pie of our kind of agricultural economic sector. So when we think about all the activities that happen around agriculture in Ventura County, there's a number of them, and animal husbandry is a piece of that. But compared to some other areas, our livestock and poultry is not a really large contribution to our portfolio the way that some of the other activities are. And so what we see here is using information for the Ventura County livestock and crop reports. And I pulled information because of the way that it's reported from the 2016, 2018, and 2020 crop reports. we see that livestock and poultry year over year is typically less than 1% of the overall economic contribution. Now, that is not an acreage, that is not in units, that is not on anything. This is using dollars as a proxy for those things to show kind of where the activities are occurring. But there are lots of ways that you could measure it. This is just one way that I chose to measure it when taking a look at this at the request of this council. So, and that's really all I have. And I'm happy to answer any questions about how we went about trying to answer this question. And thanks for your time.
Okay, so are there any questions? I see Councilmember Ferris, your hand, go ahead, and then Councilmember White.
Yeah, Clay, can you put that table back up?
Absolutely.
I'm interested in to try to understand what was the cause for the significant drop we're seeing in 2020. 2015 to 2019, a number of these things are like poultry is going down steadily. Livestock seems to be steady up until from 2019 to 2020. Same with livestock.
And that was something that I observed as well, but not something that I investigated.
Okay. And then the 6th column, which is agricultural sector, all categories, what does that number represent?
That number is all agricultural sector. So it could be orchard crops and row crops. It's going to be apiary products. It's going to be biodynamic and biological services. It's going to be vegetable
total
specialty
market related to all agricultural products.
Yeah, and for anyone that's not familiar with it, and the agricultural TAC, for example, if you all want to get together and have a look at these and see where some of this information is coming from, counties across California report to a pair of different departments at the state level, but we create a livestock and crop report, or crop and livestock report every year. And it really has a lot of fantastic information down to the individual crop types that you're using, as well as information on top crops and those sorts of things. And there's a certain level of consistency with those crop reports that is really pretty powerful. And then I believe there's information that is also reported to the Department of Pesticides at the state level, as well as the Department of, I'm not sure if I'm getting the acronym right, but I think it's the Department of Farming and Agriculture with the state. So that's where a lot of the local reporting goes to the state level, and there's certain other pieces of information and data that would be available for folks that want to look into that information. But,
and does this say effectively, given the gross domestic product of all agricultural products in the county, that livestock and poultry are 0.1% of that total that we see? Yet going back to the one slide before this, that are these the contributors from those livestock and poultry, or are they for all agricultural?
These are the emissions for all agricultural sectors, not for those individual poultry and livestock operations. If I wasn't clear on that, I apologize.
And so the fertilizer part is like, everything we're growing too. Is that?
That's correct. It would include all of the different agricultural sectors.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. I just wanted to get my bearings on the numbers.
Of course.
And then I saw Councilmember White, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Sylvia, I was going to ask a question, but I think in the interest of time, I will not.
Okay. All right. So thank you, Clay, for the presentation. Any comments from the public here for item number 11?
Yes. Terry.
Oh, hi, Terry. Okay, so yeah,
sorry,
so you're a member
I don't
of
know how to
the.
push my hand up I'm using my phone.
That's okay.
So
That's okay.
my question was, do we know how much water is actually consumed by the animal agriculture, and how much land is being used for crops that are grown primarily for animals? So that was my, I guess Ventura County is not real big on that, but elsewhere I know is. So I was just wondering about the water consumption because we are limited to our water here in Ventura County, right? So I was a little curious about that also.
Sure. So the only thing that I looked up were greenhouse gas emissions, and then using the gross value associated as kind of a look at how much of that activity was occurring. But I did not look at acres. I didn't look at units of production. I did not look at water consumption associated with this when we were conducting, answering this question. It was focused primarily on greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So any comments from from the public? Item number 11. Oh, item number 12. Thank you. Okay, so seeing none. So thank you for the report. It sounds like there's still a little bit of digging that maybe even the ag tech can look into.
And I'm happy to work with the Ag Tech, particularly Councilmember Hernandez. If you do want to dig into this a little further, then we can coordinate directly, and then perhaps with the rest of that TAC group to make sure if I'm going to do research, I want to make sure it's useful for the TAC for both my time as well as the TAC's time. And that would go for any of the TACs.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thanks. And so let's go to item number 13, knowing that we have about 11 more minutes till we end the meeting here. So this is where council member comments and future agenda items are parked on the agenda. So we do have item 13A before others jump in and do their comments. We wanted to take a look at the additional meetings that we have planned for this year and some proposed dates. So go ahead, Clay. I think you have a document for us.
Sure. Give me one moment. I don't have a presentation on this. It was really just sharing dates, but each of the dates provided in the memo that you received in your agenda packet, those were items where staff went ahead and took a look and made sure that these are dates that do not conflict with the Board of Supervisors adopted dates, which is part of why I carried it out to February of next year, is because that's how far their calendar goes out to. So I'll go ahead and do a quick screen share on that. So here we're looking at the dates. And so you see that this is set up for a monthly calendar. And I tried to keep these approximately 4 weeks apart so that we just didn't get into one where we've got 5 or 6 weeks between one meeting and 3 weeks or 2 weeks between another. So we tried to keep some consistency. Staff is happy to look at alternatives if you need them. I did have one conversation with an individual council member who had kind of noted it would be easier for their schedule if it was a calendared schedule that was every third Thursday or something like that. But that's just not when we're shooting for gaps in the board schedule, they don't have that same consistency that lets us do that from what I saw. So these are the dates that I'm putting forward. If there are any problems with this, obviously happy to look at alternative dates for the council if that would be helpful.
Any comments, or I'll entertain a motion as well. Go ahead, Councilmember Baldwin.
Just a comment about the December 20th meeting. It's a rather hectic time of the year. And I guess I've had mixed thoughts on it. In my case, I like to be with all of my family because all my granddaughters come in and it's family time. So I don't want to be bothered by this. But on the other hand, if something really important comes up that can only be dealt with in December, I suppose we go. But I personally would rather not have a meeting that late in December.
One of the things I would note is that we just met on December 21st last month, and I thought that Councilmember Ontiveros gave us a good recommendation on managing that by having something there where there wasn't so much a decision point, but we used it as more of an educational way so that we continue doing our work and use it productively. But maybe where if a few members were unable to attend due to commitments, it didn't negatively impact the entire council, which I thought was a good compromise. I would say too that December 2022, the board is not meeting on the 20th of December, and it's not meeting on the 27th of December. So those are the two available dates, and the 20th seemed slightly less painful than the 27th, although neither seemed ideal.
I will say that my proposal, the education proposal, on my calendar, I said, oh, it's ready for December. It was almost ready for November. I've been working on this for a while. Maybe before there's criteria and what, maybe I should have jumped ahead before the criteria, then I wouldn't have to deal with it. But anyway, for that very reason you said, I just decided I'm not taking it in December. No meat in December, so to speak.
And Councilmember Hernandez, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was gonna question that one also in December. But if that's our only alternative, the 20th and the 27th, I think the 20th is best.
Okay. All right, so would there be a motion that we can entertain at this time for the meeting agenda, or to schedule our meetings through 2020, early 2023?
I'll
Motion.
move approval.
I second.
Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and have a roll call then.
All right. So Councilmember White,
Aye.
Councilmember Ferris,
Yes.
Chair Schnapp,
Yes.
Councilmember Ontiveros,
Yes.
Councilmember Garola,
Aye.
Councilmember Hernandez,
Aye.
Councilmember Baldwin.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Great, thank you. And then let's go on to the second part of the item number 13 is the council member comments, updates, and discussion. Yes, Councilmember White.
Okay, I would like to report that the other issues TAC has met, not in person, but we met, and reporting that we will be coming to the CEC, hopefully the next meeting, with two proposals. And we hope to flesh them out with the new evaluation criteria. Understand the importance of that. The first one is a proposed policy resolution of the Board of Supervisors supporting statewide efforts to reduce methane leaks from abandoned oil and gas wells and pipelines. The second one is a proposed program addressing carbon dioxide emissions from existing buildings. These are two policies and programs that are not presently included in the county's climate action plan. So that's our report.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Councilmember Baldwin, did you have your hand up? No? All right. So saying none, then let's go ahead and go to item number 14, which is to adjourn. And so we'll adjourn the January 18th, 2022 meeting for Ventura County Climate Emergency Council. And we'll see you then at the next scheduled meeting, which would then end up being in the packet here. It would be February 22nd.
February 22nd.
All right. Thanks, everyone, and have a good month, and hopefully we'll have some great reports coming back from some tax next month. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all.
Everyone stay well.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.